What the Tech is brought to you by Text Expander. Text Expander helps you communicate smarter. Visit textexpander.com/podcast for 20% off your first year. Everybody, welcome to What the Tech. I'm Andrew Zarian. Of course, I'm joined by Mr. Paul Thurrott. How you doing, Paul?
Pretty good.
I was trying to come up with a name for you, but I thought just introduce him like normal today.
You know, I had this. Do you ever listen to Dave Ramsey? Do you know who Dave Ramsey is?
Yes, of course.
So he's for people who don't know, he's a financial advisor, kind of like a Susie Orman type. I go on these little things where I just overindulge in one thing. Like I've been watching a lot of old NBA videos on YouTube, or I have an obsessive personality. So I've been watching a lot of Dave Ramsey. And I had a terrible epiphany while watching this guy that has nothing to do with his content, but you and I, we just fall into this. We don't ever talk. Like, it's not like you and I have come up with something. We're going to have this greeting that we use every time we do the show. It just kind of happens. And Dave Ramsey has this. He does something very similar. So when people call into his show, they don't always ask him, but if they ask him how he's doing in return, because he'll usually say, "Hey, welcome to the show. How you doing today?" And they'll be like, "Oh, I'm doing great. Thanks. How are you doing?" Dave Ramsey will say the same thing every single time. He says, "Better than I should be."
I like that answer.
He says it every time. And I got to tell you, binge watching this guy, I find it a little irritating.
Yeah, is it
I don't
really?
like it. Yeah.
So are you retiring the pretty good?
No, I the truth is I don't do it on purpose. Like I don't do it. I don't think about it.
That's a catchphrase though.
It literally, no, but I guess it is, but I don't intend it to be. Like it just happens to me. It happens naturally. It's my response. And I guess, again, not to read too much into it. I mean, I'm from Boston. I'm the kind of guy that I am. If you ever ask me how I'm doing, I can tell you, like, I will never say, "Oh, Andrew, I'm doing great." Everything's great.
Yeah.
Like I will only, as good as I'll get it is pretty good. And that's what comes out. That's who I am.
I like that. It's a good
weird, right? I know,
good
but
representation of you.
But seeing someone else doing it, I find it a little irritating.
You know what mine has become over the last 4 months? Hanging in there. How you doing? Hanging in there.
Yeah.
That's become my thing. We have a lot to talk about. Last week, by the way, thank you to everybody, all the new viewers. It was a big week for us, apparently. I didn't think that Apple, that podcast we did on Monday last week regarding WWDC would blow up, but it's become a really big thing. I covered a lot of places.
It seems like a million years ago, by the way.
I know. Well, that's the problem.
I will say, sorry to interrupt, but just so, one thing that's interesting, I don't remember what we talked about anymore. It was so long ago and so much, you kind of process all the information. I will say that whatever we discussed, however we did it, it was a real fog of war thing at that time, right? Like the event had just happened. So I think the two of us were in many ways still processing what we heard and saw. And so now it's like 10 days later or whatever. We probably have, in some cases, different views on things.
Yeah, I
maybe. I don't know.
Some stuff, yeah, and I kind of wanted to lead into this. By the way, guys, if you enjoy the show, I want to get it over with. I want to give the little plugs. Definitely check out Thurrott.com, Thurrott Premium. The main topic that we're going to be talking about is based on an article that Paul wrote here. It says, Redmond, get your photocopiers. Start your photocopiers, please. Right. Paul wrote this on June 24th, which is last week. I'm excited. I want to talk about this because there's a lot to take from this. Last week, like Paul said, we discussed the event as it had just happened, like literally right after the event went on. And, we're always, one thing that we do a little bit differently is that we will make our comments about something that happens, like breaking news, but we always say, let's reevaluate the following week. Right? A lot of excitement. You see something, it's new, it's different.
It's the 7 stages of grief.
I know, with technology.
Or reaction.
Talking about grief. Bye-bye Microsoft Store. We'll talk about that also. But I want to talk about this because last week was a big week.
Okay.
Obviously, Apple unveiled a whole bunch of stuff, but you wrote an article on therot.com, premium article called Redmond, start your photocopiers, please. I want to get your, I want you to talk about this a little bit because a lot of people are impressed by it's small changes in Mac OS in Big Sur, but if you look at this, right, and I've been playing around with the beta.
Right,
this is made for touchscreen.
That's interesting. Yeah, I think you might be right.
That's it's the beginning of touchscreen.
Yeah.
And
so, Andrew, we gotta cover some ground here. There's a lot of stuff to think about. So let me jump outside of that article and outside of the reaction to what the Apple did with the Mac and everything, just for 1 second, because there's been a bunch of things that have happened since then that are related to this that I think are really interesting. So, supporting what you just said, there is a rumor, and it's a rumor, but Apple is talking about doing a continuum type thing with the iPhone, where not this year's iPhone, but maybe next year or the year after that, will come with Mac OS on it as well as iOS. The idea being that so you dock it, you get a screen, you get a keyboard, you get a mouse, and it becomes a Mac. And because the underlying hardware is the same, this makes sense. It can run both. You could dual boot or whatever you want to call that. It can run the iPhone apps that are on the device. You could have some Mac apps on there, of course. You have to, come on, admit it. This idea has always intrigued people, the one device thing. Apple is the company that could pull it off. Now, Apple moves at the speed they move, so this is something for 2027 maybe or something, but that's interesting. We also got the first benchmark results from the Mac, the prototype device they're giving out to developers for now. And this is the device that runs at, I think it's the A12Z, if I'm not mistaken, which is the same processor that's in the current iPad Pros. And that device performs as well in emulation as the fastest, Windows 10 PC running on ARM does in natively, meaning that the native performance of the Apple device is significantly better, and it's only a prototype. And this is not the type of chip they're going to put in Macs. This is the one from the iPad Pro. Like, they have special, even better chips for the Mac coming. So that's interesting. So just with that as a backdrop, and I should point out too, I mean, there are people listening to this show who care as much about this stuff as I do, but
of course
we should pause and recognize for a moment that most people do not give a shit about any of this stuff, in the sense that I approach this from the perspective of a Windows user, as someone who prefers Windows to the Mac. And what I'm hoping to see, and this is the inspiration for the article that I wrote, is for Microsoft to do as well by Windows as I feel that Apple is doing by the Mac, and so let me
cut you in there, right? It's a very pretty OS, right? Like the small changes that they have done has, you could see that they're modernizing and they're on a trajectory of of implementing touch. Even just that launch menu that I guess on the side where you can see your notifications and everything. That is the big
control panel
difference
type
here.
thing.
That control panel thing is the one on the current version of Mac OS is made for it's very old school, small print.
Yeah,
this is straight out of iOS.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, to people who haven't actually used it or seen pictures of it, when you hear something like that, the initial knee-jerk reaction is usually going to be at least what I had, which was, this is the dumbification of the Mac. They're bringing it down to the level of iOS, and that's bad. But the truth is, it looks great, and it works well with a mouse. It's professional and attractive looking. It's modern, like you said. There is a consistency between Apple's mobile platforms and the Mac, which kind of didn't exist before. I mean, there were little places where it kind of did, but they've kind of blown the thing out. But the issue I have, again, from the perspective of a Windows user, is that what Microsoft hasn't done over the years is move the entire platform forward, either literally the platform, the fundamental technical part of it, or in this case, what we're really talking about is the user interface. So, Windows 7 or Windows Vista introduced like a glass UI. Windows 8 introduced a flat UI that was touch first and blah, blah, blah. Windows 10 is sort of a hybrid of the Windows 8 UI where the desktop kind of comes back to prominence as a start menu again. It works pretty well on different types of PCs, whatever. But at every step along the way, they've left little vestigial parts of older version of Windows in there, icons and fonts and
why is that? Is that just under?
So yeah, it's hard to summarize it really quickly. I think of it as no code left behind. Microsoft's central promise that it's made to developers, to users, especially business customers, is your old stuff is going to keep working. And, there's things like, so why does Microsoft still have the control panel when there's a new settings interface? The reason is that people rely on the control panel because there are developers who have extended it with their own control panels. And those things are out there in the world and they see the data and they're like, look, there are millions of people using this stuff. We can't just say no to it. But, Apple does exactly the opposite. So, they're very aggressive at getting rid of old things. It's not, for example, like people who don't use the Mac may not understand this. When Apple introduces in the month of June a brand new UI for the Mac and then ships it in September or whenever they're going to do, so in 3 months' time, they're able to do this because they've been doing this for like a decade and a half, or actually 2 decades, right? So ever since macOS 10 came out, they have consistently moved all of the user experience forward. They didn't do it in dribs and drabs. They always go forward with all of it. So it's not like today they suddenly were like, man, we got 20 years of garbage in there. Let's clean it all up. And they did like a great job. No, they've been doing this all along. Yeah. It's what enables them to make this kind of a UX change. The problem for Microsoft is they've never done this. So every time there's a new UI, you can pick apart any little piece of it you want. You could do like, anyone can do this. If you're using dark mode in Windows 10, bring up a file explorer. It's dark, but then go to the file, it's the properties window. It's like options, change folder and search options. That window comes up and it's white because this thing it's not consistent. They never finish the job is the way I describe it.
Here's how I see that, right? Do you think that approach has everything to do with the fact that operating systems now are constantly being changed every year? So the priority of getting everything done at the same time to kind of streamline the UI is not that much there because you have another opportunity in 6 months?
My opinion, and this is based on decades of experience with this company, is that it's about the company culture. Microsoft is a software engineering driven company, and the way you get rewarded, the way you move forward, the way you get a raise, the way you get a new job is you work on something new. You don't fix something old. They don't reward you for that. There's no point in doing. No one's going to allocate money for that or resources. Yeah. As long as it just works, they don't care. And look, there are a million stories you could tell. If you ever watched, what was that PBS series back in the 90s? The guy from InfoWorld did a great series about the computer industry, and he interviewed Steve Jobs and Bill Gates and whatever. All at the time, it was in the 90s, and Steve Jobs was still at Next. It was before he came back to Apple. He was still really bitter that Microsoft had kind of won personal
Nova.
Computing.
You're talking about Nova? No,
it was a limited. It was like it had a name like Revenge of the Nerds or something. It was something like that. I'm sorry, I can't remember the name of it. It was Robert X. Cringely was the guy who did it. Anyway, the point is just that Steve Jobs at the time said, the problem with Microsoft is they don't have any class. They don't know how to design things. And Microsoft it's fair to say, I mean, Microsoft's an engineering driven culture, but even when there is good design or what they think is good design, they apply it haphazardly and they don't go all the way. And especially with something like Windows, where it's a legacy product, they talk about this thing called the Fluent Design System, which is their latest kind of design language. They love using these terms, but they apply it. It's like throwing spaghetti at the wall. Like, in this release, we put a little bit of Fluent on this menu, and on this one, we put a little bit over here on this control and this navigation panel, whatever. But it just creates a haphazard thing. You can look this up. There's somewhere on the internet. There's a page that lists the 11 different menu styles that can be found in Windows 10 or whatever the number is. Like, you right click on the desktop and then you right click somewhere else, and it looks completely different as different colors.
Example, right? Sound settings, right?
Yeah.
The sound settings, there's 3 different options.
Yeah.
Like just one,
Yep.
there's one in control panel, one on the menu,
Yep.
and there's another one within settings. Is that because they've
It's
combined so many of the? Okay, here's a better question:
I don't know what to tell you.
is the problem Windows 8 still dealing
Well,
with
no,
that?
this
The
has been
effect
a
of that?
problem. It's predates Windows 8. It's when Windows Vista introduced the glass, there were still non-glass UIs that were from previous versions. There are still Windows Vista icons in Windows 10 today. It's just they never do the whole thing. You've tried the beta, like you said, on the Mac.
Yeah.
Like you can look in the applications folder and look at all the app icons. They've done it all. There isn't like a weird little one application they didn't touch. Like they fix all of it. And that's what's missing at Microsoft. That's the point of the article I wrote. It's like, and for people who don't remember the history of this, unfairly and it was not true at the time, but back in the Windows Vista timeframe, before Vista came out, and Apple was probably working on macOS Tiger or whatever the release was, they put up at their developer shows, at the developer show that year, these big banners that said, Redmond, start your photocopiers, meaning we're going to announce all these new features in macOS 10, and now Microsoft can rip them off for Windows Vista, as if the features that Microsoft announced actually first in Windows Vista that then did appear in the Mac OS were Apple's invention. Like it was kind of a snarky and unfair, I thought, complaint. But, to flash forward now today, 15 years later, whatever it is. And Redmond, start your photocopiers, because what we've learned over time is that Apple's approach, at least to this kind of thing, is correct. Microsoft is so afraid of alienating even the smallest segment of its business customers, especially.
But they
They
did that.
won't
They
let
did
go
that.
of old tech.
They did that with Windows 8, didn't they?
No, that stuff was all still in there. I mean, they temporarily got rid of the start menu and had a start screen. They temporarily got rid of the start button, and that stuff all came back in 8.1. But the underlying system was the same. Like there was a bunch of new stuff, but even that's like a good example of, like they introduced this Metro UI in Windows 8, and it's immature. It's not very capable. It's only on the new stuff. It's you can pick any number of power options, event viewer, the device manager, all these legacy things, disk management, computer management, Windows PowerShell doesn't count, but task manager actually has been updated. But these things are all legacy UIs of different ages and of different types. So Brad said to me the other day, he was like, oh yeah, he's like, a lot of people complain because there's settings and control panel. And I'm like, that's only the tip of the settings iceberg. I mean, there's also Microsoft Management Console apps. I mean, there's all kinds of legacy ways to do things, and they just never bring it forward. They just let it sit there and rot. And you guys, touch it, fix it, make it consistent. Satya Nadella says he wants people to love Windows 10. But Windows 10 is full of advertising. It's full of crapware. It's full of data collection that you can't turn off. And it's full of legacy UI from the past and legacy technology. It's a freaking mess. So, that's me. So when I see the Mac and when I see what Apple did there, it's hard as a Windows user not to, jealous is not the right word.
So
but,
here's a question for you.
Be
Right?
bothered by that.
I mean, it's going to sound like they've never attempted this before, but wouldn't the answer be, hey, you want the legacy product? Here's the enterprise version. You want the brand new one? Here you go.
Well, I mean, there's different levels of backward compatibility. I mean, it's not just the UI; it's the underlying tech as well. And Microsoft has, I mean, to be fair, I mean, they have tried in some ways to modernize Windows. These things have mostly failed, right? We've talked about all the stuff: Windows RT, Windows 10 on ARM, Windows S mode, blah blah blah, whatever. But they can't. Like they always take these baby steps forward, or they take steps in certain areas, but they leave other stuff. They just let it sit there. Things in Windows don't get touched for decades. Sometimes, I don't know. I as someone who cares deeply about this kind of thing, it's troubling to see how easily Apple can do this. And that's over and above, by the way, them also moving to a completely new computer platform, right? Yeah. Which is an astonishing technical feat. Just making the UI more consistent. and
the
beautiful and modern.
this version of the UI, which it's been a slow
Yeah.
change, right? This
Yep.
version of the UI for Big Sur is probably the most complete when it comes to unifying iOS, iPad, the iOS interface
Right.
essentially
Right.
with the Mac OS. Something that they
Yep.
said they didn't want to do for a very, very long time. I just
Yeah.
watched a video. There was I forget the YouTuber, but
Mhm.
he did this great video explaining, pretty much showing like Apple's going back on everything that Steve Jobs had said about combining the UI. Craig Federici,
Right.
Federici.
Yeah. Something.
Federici.
Frederici and something. Yeah.
He had initially said they were not unifying the UI, but you look at the launcher, the Launchpad. You brought this up last week. I mean, there's a new Launchpad, but you look at Launchpad,
Yeah.
that's set up for touch. You look at their new
Mhm.
control menu, right? What are they? I don't know what they're calling it. I forgot the name that they're calling that.
I don't know if it's
Action,
called. Yeah,
launch
I don't know
menu,
what it's
whatever
called.
they're calling it, right?
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
little widgets for
Mhm.
Wi-Fi and Bluetooth and AirDrop. That's
Yeah.
meant to do this. I see
Yeah.
that. I want
I
to go
mean,
like this.
well, so here's the thing. I think you might be onto something, and this is why I mentioned the iPhone rumor because, you know, it- look, a lot of people have called on Apple to add touch to the Mac. Apple's always said they don't want to do that. You can be cynical and say, well, that means they are going to do it, but um, maybe this stuff will eventually run on iPads and iPhones, like like the rumor suggests, and that's why it's like that. Not just to be visually consistent, and I think it looks good. It's
So
natural.
is a rumor that it's going to
Um,
be like a? I know you brought up Continuum. So is it going to be
mhm.
pick up where you left off? Is that going to be like you got to plug
No,
it
I'm
into
sorry,
something?
sorry. Yeah, sorry. There are two. When I said Continuum, I was referring to a Microsoft thing. So back when Windows Mobile was a thing, you could buy a dock. It was like a USB dock, and you could plug your Windows Mobile phone into it, and you would attach it to a big screen with an HDMI cable, and then you would have like a keyboard and a mouse. And it basically, you don't get the UI of the phone. You get a desktop like on normal Windows. And what you see in the start menu is what you see on the start screen on the phone. And you run the apps. And if they're universal apps, remember this was the dream, they would know they were running on a big screen and they would look more
Mhm.
like a desktop app instead of looking like a phone app.
Yeah.
And, or if you're familiar with Samsung DeX, this is a similar scheme that Samsung made for its own Android phones. Same idea. You have a dock, et cetera, et cetera. So this is the rumor that Apple will do this. And by the way, now that they're all running the same chipset,
Yeah.
apps will be 100% compatible. That could make some sense.
As an Apple, here's the thing though, right? Apple likes to sell hardware. It's the opposite
Yes.
approach of Microsoft. Microsoft hates selling hardware. they
Yeah.
Apple
Right.
loves to sell hardware. I can't see Apple creating a device that's going to affect sales of multiple devices. So if you have an iPad, I
Yeah.
don't see Apple telling you that you could run Mac OS on here. However, if
Well,
you have
yeah,
an
but
iPad Pro, and you
right.
have your I guess your keyboard and your mouse,
Mhm.
right? Your trackpad. And you have a Mac and it notices that you have a Mac also somewhere. I could see them doing some sort of continuum feature where now you have Mac OS running on this thing. They're not
Okay.
going
I
to do
mean,
it cut
look,
and dry. I mean,
it
I
does.
don't. I know it
Sorry.
doesn't matter in the long scheme of things, but
Well, no, I mean,
I,
I was just gonna say there are multiple ways you could do it, and you got to remember that the hardware sale they're cutting out when they add this feature, if they ever do, to iPad or iPhone, is the Mac, and who cares? I mean, that's their smallest platform in many ways, right? So bringing professional capabilities to the iPad in particular, or to a docked iPhone, whatever it is, like however they do it, doesn't really matter, but is really very interesting because one of the big knocks against the iPad Pro is like this thing's not a real computer until you can develop software on it. Well, Xcode will run on it now. You will, or an Android Studio or whatever. I mean, you will be able to develop apps on it. That gets very interesting. Once you can develop apps for the platform you're using on the platform you're using, right?
yeah.
That thing is now a first class uh, computing platform, and that's how you get there. So I could, I could see Apple wanting that. This is, by the way, also where they have the lock-in, and that's very powerful to Apple because their whole services model that they're building up, this new big business, is predicated on you subscribing to more and more things and paying them
Yeah.
more on a regular basis, not buying one computer and holding on to it for 7 years, or
They
buying
don't want
one
that.
phone and holding on to it for 3 years or 5 years or whatever. So I think this is more about keeping people in that ecosystem, because the problem with the Mac is you can go to the web and run any software. You know, you can find a web app that does as good as anything on the Mac. And so why bother with Apple? Never gets a cut of that. And what they want is to keep people in their ecosystem. So in that sense, bringing the Mac forward, because you're always going to have those professional users that need it, but bringing that compatibility in the other direction, which is the one thing they're not talking about this year, of course, it's just starting. I think is the next logical step to the future. This is the post PC world they keep talking about. This is the reality of it. You know, this is how it really happens.
Well, I mean,
It's
listen, in
interesting.
Apple's sake, right? There's so much strategy in their product development and the product release cycle because, like you said, being stuck in that ecosystem is the key to their success. You're stuck with the software. Yeah, so your entry is obviously an iPhone at this point. Everybody's entry into this ecosystem is the iPhone. When I say everybody, I mean the majority. Let me just say that again. Is the iPhone. So you get the iPhone. Now you kind of justify maybe the year later you got an iPad. Right? Now you have the iPad. Now you're in that ecosystem. Yeah. You need a laptop. That's coming up. All your stuff is on iCloud. All your stuff is here. So now you buy a Mac. And the cycle continues. So now you're at the third year. You know what you do the following year after you buy the Mac? You upgrade your iPhone.
Okay, but I mean, I think what Apple has realized is that when they talk about the synthesis of hardware and software, the real, as good as Apple's margins are on hardware, and they are amazing and unfairly amazing, the real easy margins are on the software and services end. And you have a captive audience of 1 billion people plus now, whatever it is. And yeah, those hardware sales are fantastic every several years, whatever it is. But you getting a micro payment every single month for Apple TV Plus, for Apple News Plus, for Apple Music, for whatever the services are, is way better. You know, if you can get some segment of your population to keep paying you, it becomes a steady rhythm of money. You know,
people forget. They don't even
use
the service.
And you know, and whatever the schedule is, I mean, you know, you can watch Apple's earnings announcements. I mean, their earnings go through the roof when an iPhone comes out, and then the next quarter they still make a shit ton of money. They're huge, but they go down. You know, like you can see the up down is based around hardware. What Apple wants, what any company wants, is for a mid to high level where it's kind of consistent, and that's, you get it through the services. You know, that's, you know, Apple can talk all they want about how this is great for people and all that stuff, but really it's great for Apple, and fair enough, whatever. They're not a charity, but I mean, I don't know. I think bringing the Mac's capabilities to their other devices, their huge volume devices, that makes tons of sense. You know,
John Luca in the chat room brings up a good point. He goes, "What we're talking about is Sidecar 2.0." Right? Because they introduced Sidecar last year, and I got to tell you, a lot of people are not using it. It was a cool novelty. Right. Like when they first did it, I did it once. I was like, this is really cool. I could bring my desktop over. They could expand it.
Yep. Well, now you're running it on the device.
Now you're running it on the device. It's very interesting to me. Adam also said in the chat room, I'd love to see Paul live in Linux for a month and write a series about it. You know what? I would love to see that too.
Okay.
Come on, Paul.
Well, so here's the deal.
1 month.
I do I've come closer to this than you may believe. So I have a series of articles called Living With, right? So I've done Living with Chromebook. I've done Living with Windows 7 when it was on the way out. I have 2 I've started but never published, right? One is called Living with PC Gaming, and one of them is called Living with Linux. And since the pandemic started, I've also thought of doing one, I guess I'd call it like Living with a Laptop, because what that means is, like, today I have a desktop computer here that I use for data, you know, podcast writing, whatever. And then obviously, like, I'll spend sometimes afternoons in a different room or upstairs in the bed or whatever, and I'll use a laptop. So the idea there was just using a laptop all the time. I have tried to make Linux work for me so that I could write this series. And the truth is I can't get into it. Like it's just, it's like it's a step too far. Like I pay close attention to what's going on in the Linux world, closer than I think many realize. I install so many distributions virtually in a virtual environment first, just to kind of see how it's going. I always have a couple of computers that have Linux on them, and they're never. It's everything doesn't work. I don't know what else to say. It's Linux doesn't do touch for one thing. That's not a huge deal. But you were talking about touch in the thing in the Mac. I mean, I find myself. I had elementary OS on a 15-inch HP laptop, and they have the menus up in the corner. You kind of, I'm sitting there hitting the screen. I'm like, why isn't this doing it right? Because it's Linux, But it's all I'm saying is I will probably get there. Believe it or not, this is something that I've been basically trying to do for a long time, and I just can't, and have never gotten over that hump. I can't explain.
I gotta tell you though, if there's any moment for the usability of Linux to be easy, it's now, right? It's.
I mean, well, it is. It's better than it's ever been for sure.
Yeah.
Linux suffers from. I think there are too many distributions for one thing. I think that's confusing. There are different formats for these. I'll just call them stores, for lack of a better term. These repositories of apps, which I think is a neat thing to have in the OS. But they're different.
And they were the
even
first
things
to do it,
like,
by the way. Ubuntu was probably the first to do like a app store.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Well, in modern day, I mean, I think I feel
Modern
like.
day.
Yeah, I mean, there have been attempts over the years. I mean, I don't know. I don't know. I even Ubuntu. Like, if you look, I mean, how many different versions of Ubuntu are there? 8, or 9 for different, different window managers. Different. I mean, some are designed for lower end devices with kind of a light and thin and light.
I just need to find a device.
UX.
We were talking about this a couple of weeks ago, and I think it was I can't remember if it was on the actual show or on the post show, but we were talking about using Linux and the different distros and how beautiful they are. Some of them. I just need to find a device to run it on. Like, I don't have an outdated. I don't have a device that's
right.
Just on that
will work.
cusp.
It will just work. Yeah.
Yeah, because I have a bunch of surfaces that I don't want to do. I'll tell you that.
No. You don't. I would never screw with that on a Surface. I think the best one that's kind of a mainstream computer is probably the Dell XPS 13, because they have a developer edition that does come with Linux. I reviewed the Windows version of that recently, and I don't remember the exact with the exact feature set, but there were 3 or 4 things where it said these won't work in Linux, whatever they were. So probably like facial recognition was one of them. Maybe the fingerprint reader. I don't actually recall, but there were some features like, I think it had like a I'll just make something up because I actually don't remember, but one of them might have been like Dolby Atmos speakers. Like, you're not going to get Dolby Atmos in Linux or something like that. So there's still, I mean, even on a fully supported system, there's still issues, but you get, Lenovo just made an announcement that they're going to certify all of their workstation class products, which is, granted kind of a small number of products, but that they will run and be compatible with Linux. That's actually really interesting. And that sets the stage for them to bring it down market to ThinkPad or whatever. That would, maybe. I've been open to this for a long time. I joke about Linux a lot. But I would do it. I mean, I would try it for sure. I just, you don't have any, it's hard to explain. Like, I actually do this a lot, and I'll bring the thing up on a computer and it's like, oh, this doesn't work. Or the track speed is terrible, because honestly, on most older HP laptops, those trackpads are terrible. They only recently got good, but I've tried. I will keep trying. I'm not going to give up on it, but I just don't want. Please don't think that I've ignored this or have never even thought about it.
You're ignoring it, Paul. You've been ignoring it for all these.
PaulHatesLinux.com. You can see the whole story.
Hey, we were since we were talking about the UI of Mac. Let's touch on this Windows 10 Insider preview build that gives us a new glimpse at the start menu. They redesigned it slightly.
Yeah. Well, did they? This is such a subtle change.
Smaller icons on the actual side, like the listing of apps.
No, all they did was they got rid of the box on the icons. I think they're the same size. This was so subtle that when I brought it up on Surface Book 2, I had to go look at my other computer and look at them side by side because I thought I didn't get it, and I was like, this can't be right. And I did get it. It's super subtle. And I wrote an article about this morning. I compared this to two things from Microsoft's past. Pre-ribbon, Microsoft used to have something they called putting lipstick on a pig, where they would change the UI of Office with every version so that if you were looking over the shoulder of someone using it, you could tell at a glance what version of Office it was. And they didn't do this to make it better, although, obviously there were sometimes improvements related to the menus and toolbars and things, but they changed the UI only for that reason, so you could tell, because they didn't want it to keep looking the same every single version, because obviously there are different capabilities and you want to know what you're looking at. This is not like that. This is less than that. They literally took it's the same Windows 10 UI and they just subtly changed the style. The other thing I compared it to was Windows Mobile 6.5, which a lot of people probably don't remember, but after the iPhone came out, yeah. So Microsoft, honestly, they came out. There were some good ideas, but the problem was all they really changed was the lock screen and the home screen. Once you got into an app, once you got below the home screen in the UI, whether it was like a control panel type interface, whatever they called it at the time. Well, those were all designed for the little stylus that used to come with those devices. So home screen, you could hit it with your hands. It was probably, I can't remember what you called it. Remember we had
the Honeycomb UI. That was their future.
Yeah. Well, it was different looking, and it was it was unique. It was, you could make the argument it was kind of a first take on a tile type thing. But it was just surface level. Once you got below once you launched something, the touch was gone. You couldn't touch other things, and that's to me, like, this new start menu thing is like, I don't know. I use Windows every day. I write about Windows every day. I write books about Windows. I feel like I would notice this if it was big.
Yeah.
I was really excited to see it, and when it came up, I was like, oh. And by the way, the other little splash of cold water to the face is Apple is going to come out with a whole UX that's going to be on every Mac day 1 September, consistent across the board. This start menu thing, the earliest this could appear is April 2021. This is not coming in the next version of Windows.
Yeah.
It's coming maybe in a future version. It might not even be in that version. So yeah, I mean, I guess enjoy that if you're on the dev channel in the Insider program. It looks fine. I mean, it's if you like the Windows 10 UX today, you're going to be okay with it, but it's too bad. It's too bad because Apple just announced this sweeping change, and it's like, look, they're doing it right.
Yeah.
And then Microsoft's, look, we have a start menu. It's like, yeah, it looks exactly like the other one.
Yeah. I want to get your opinion on this. This week, actually, was it yesterday this came out? Yeah, the 30th. I apologize, a couple days ago. YouTube TV has increased its monthly subscription cost. This is a big deal. It's $64.99 now. This is now, you are in cable territory. So
yep.
I just the evolution of cord cutting, right? And the beginning cause, the reason for this was that you want to break this concept that you're locked into a contract for 2 years. You're paying hundreds of dollars a month to get content, when in reality you could kind of pick and choose and go with a digital way of getting this content at a much cheaper cost via Sling TV, AT&T's AT&T.
Do you remember what the price was when YouTube TV first launched?
I want to say it was definitely under $50. What was it? 40?
Oh no, it was $35 at the most. It was possibly possibly $29.99, but
it could have been.
It was either $30 or $35. But
it's $64.99 now. Yeah,
so it's gone. It's almost doubled, right? So it's not their fault. I mean, the unfortunate reality is that there's a reason. Well, this isn't the only reason, but the reason that cable TV went with these packages is because the content creators demanded it. It's not important what the exact companies are, but imagine there's a company like that has one popular channel, like Comedy Central or something, but they own these 20 other channels. And they're like, well, you're not getting Comedy Central unless you buy these other pieces of crap down here, whatever they are. Yeah. And that's how that works. And so your cable bill goes up $20 instead of $5, like, because you just wanted the one thing. And the reality is, this is what's happening with the cord cutting services. They're running into the same problem. So Their
The
users are
licensing fee.
demanding. What's that?
Licensing fees.
Yeah, it's just. But remember, so you touched on, I think, the thing that people need to keep in mind. Yeah, it's fair to say 3 years ago, whenever it was, when this thing first came out, there were two reasons you would adopt this. One was the price, which was much lower, and the second was the ability that you're not on a yearly contract. You can leave, you can come and go at any time. And that second one is still the case, and it still makes cord cutting better than cable because, you could say, look, we don't even watch live TV anymore for the most part. At this point, we don't watch any live TV. So if, I don't know, like if sports came back and we wanted to watch football, I could say, well, October through January, we're going to pay for YouTube TV, and then we're done. We'll just turn it off. We don't pay for it anymore. And so still cheaper than cable. I mean, it's almost double what it was, and whatever, that's nobody's fault, but that sucks. Yeah, it's just too bad. But remember that the advantage, the central advantage, I would argue, is still there, and that's the ability to come and go.
The ability to come and go. So I did a little comparison on how much FiOS costs now.
Mm-hmm.
My God, I got to tell you, it's still cheaper, but not by much.
Mm-hmm. Still cheaper.
The cost. It's
what?
still cheaper to be online. Like YouTube TV is still cheaper.
Oh, of course.
At the end of the day.
Yeah. You got to remember, though, that like for FiOS or any cable company or anything like a cable company, they're subsidizing the cost of the TV part of it and the phone part of it because they're doing internet. And so like these companies don't want to be just like a dumb pipe. They want to get these extra services. And so they price them as attractively as they can. And they do bundles that put all of these things together because they want you to have one or two phone lines and TV with premium channels and the highest speed internet you can get. And then they put it all together and they're like, look, if you paid for this stuff separately, it'd be like $100 more, but we're only charging you like $150 a month. And you're like, oh, great, I saved some money. It's like, wait, you're paying $150 a month for this? like it's a lot of money. You can make free phone calls. Everyone has a cell phone, but I mean, make phone calls over the internet if you have to. You can watch TV over the internet if you want to. Yeah. So it's these are tough businesses. I mean, I wish I could get FiOS, but I can't imagine I'm ever going to pay for cable TV again. I just can't imagine it.
I can't commit to the years, but again, remember, hardware's you got to now pay for the hardware, right?
The hardware thing you're also paying for. That's right.
You got the hardware cost, so now you need more than one. So you're gonna get two of these. So okay, fine. You need 2 boxes. That's like $8.99 on top of that. You're paying at the end of the day.
Yeah, that's a month. Or to be clear, you never pay for it, right?
No, you're paying every month.
You're leasing it or whatever. You're subscribing to it. I mean, look, you have to buy an Amazon device, a Roku, an Apple TV, whatever, but you buy it and use it for years. I mean, and these things typically cost like $100 or less. You're not paying, $8.99 a month per device because little Johnny's got to have one up in his bedroom. You got to have one in your master bedroom. You have to have one in the cellar, in the game room, or whatever you have. Yeah. I mean, that's what happened to me. I mean, one day I looked at my cable bill and I was like, because we were on, FiOS is Verizon. You could put your cell phone stuff into it. We were paying like $250 a month or some crazy thing. I was like, what is this? What are we paying for? It's like we have 2 landlines. They're not landlines.
Yeah.
They just call them landlines. There's no copper. If the internet goes down, you can't make a call. Like that's what a landline is. It's something that always works unless somebody, snips the wire. So yeah, at some point we just had that wake up call and it was like, okay. And we went back and forth on, we didn't go very smoothly away from cable, but we did eventually do it. And, I don't think I just can't imagine ever going back.
What do you think the sweet spot's going to be for the pricing? Do you think they're just going to constantly increase it, or is there going to be a revolt with this? Because a lot of people are very upset.
Of course. But, look, this pricing thing is an issue everywhere. Someone today was complaining, like Spotify is a music service, and they just announced a duo service, which is for couples. So they have like an individual premium, they have duo, they have family, and then they have like a student pricing. And what they were saying was like $9.99 a month for a music service is too much. This thing should be $6.99. And the response to that is, we all agree as consumers, I'd love to pay $3 less a month. You got to understand something. They lose money at $9.99. The reason that service is $9.99 still and not $12.99, which is what I think Spotify would have to charge to make money on it, is because Apple Music is $9.99 and it's subsidized by their iPhone business and they don't have the true cost of business bothering them, and they can keep the prices artificially low. And the truth is that would be more expensive too. Imagine the outrage if music services one day went $12.99 or $14.99 or whatever it is. I mean, and the reality is it's going to happen, guys. Like we're living on borrowed time here. And YouTube TV was, I think, remember Sony left the business last year. This is why they were like, look, we want this thing for this to make sense. We would have to charge so much that no one would want it anyway. And so they just left.
Yeah.
That sucks. That's just terrible.
Just how it is. I don't know what the answer here is, but you know what? There's so much content out there. You don't have to have cable, first of all, unless you like, live sports, but you could still figure something out. But that's like for me, I'm watching wrestling. I'm watching baseball. That's about it. I don't ever watch anything else on live programming other than those, or maybe, if it's breaking news or something, but that's all streaming. They're giving that away.
I talk about this all the time, and I literally, this is a conversation my wife and I have had. If we have this summer we have 2 kids at home. Usually we have 1, but we have a kid in college who's not usually with us, but we're still subsidizing his life, right? So we get like Spotify Premium, so he gets Spotify for free through me. He has the Netflix sign in, the Apple TV sign in. You do the family sharing stuff, whatever it is, and he can, from New York, can watch. Again, I'm paying for it, but at some point that has to go away. And we pay for multiple other services too. It's disgusting. At some point that goes away, and my wife and I literally
do you pay these services because you feel like you kind of have to be in the ecosystem to cover it, or if you weren't covering technology, would you have?
Yeah,
you would.
Yeah. So in this one case, I would have all of the ones I am currently paying for, and it's because of the family, because we have. We pay for, it's like Netflix and Hulu, and, we get Amazon with Prime. We get Disney now, although, by the way, after the first year, Disney will probably be done. And then we do this thing where, for a month or 2, we'll pay for what's now called HBO Max because we want to binge watch some HBO series, or Showtime because we want to binge some Showtime series. But in the future, and like I said, my wife and I literally had this conversation. We'll do this. We're going to do a month-to-month thing, and we'll say, look, it's July 1st. For this month, we're going to watch Netflix. That's all we're going to pay for. We're going to get rid of the other stuff that we're paying for and not pay for that. And then, but we'll pay attention to as new things come out. And so maybe as August approaches, maybe there's a 1 or 2 new series that are only on like Hulu, and we will drop Netflix and just pay for Hulu that 1 month. And like that, that to me is
worth it for you.
Look, it requires a little bit of work, but I don't even want to list out. I probably have written this somewhere, but if I were to list out like all of the online services that I pay for right now, like entertainment related, it's got to be $100 a month or something, right? It's got to be, or close to something like that. Stupid. Yeah. So that maybe that bill could be $10 or $15 a month.
Yeah, I think bundling. I think at the end of the day, these streaming services right now, they're getting so bloated with the price and the multitude of services in different areas. I think you're going to start seeing these bundles come into play. We're seeing that already with HBO Max, where you're being bundled with it's all. I mean, essentially all the Warner Media Turner properties more than anything else, but it's bundling, like ESPN. I mean, it's bundling with with Disney. You're seeing this happen.
You know what you miss, and I don't mean not miss, but what you don't have with online services that I don't miss is the conversation you would have with a cable company. Like, anyone ever do this? You call your cable company, because at this point you have to call them, and you're like, hey, I want to drop the landline part of this, and I want to, I don't want HBO, and for some reason I'm paying for 5 premium channels. I don't even watch these things, and they're like, oh yeah, you can do that. No problem. And like they knock everything off, and then they're like, okay, now your bill is $5 more a month.
Yeah.
And you're like, what? And they're like, oh, because you were getting a special deal because you were doing the bundling before, but now that you're not bundling these things, it's going to actually cost you more to get rid of them. And then it's like a hostage situation,
Yeah. You're locked. You can't drop anything.
It's the worst. And I know 50% of the people listening to this have experienced what I'm talking about. It's awful. So the nice thing about an online service is there's no person involved. There's, I'm just turning off Netflix. I mean, they might send you an email. We're sorry to see you go, blah, 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 whatever. But I just turn it off, turn it on. I don't know. Something like, every once in a while on cable, there'll be like a deal. Look, you can get HBO, Cinemax, and Showtime for $10 a month, and you're like, for 6 months, you're like, you know what? That's a good deal. I'm going to promise myself I'm going to watch a lot of content, and that's going to make it totally worth it. You do it for like 2 weeks, you forget about it, and then 9 months later, you're like, what's this extra $35 on the bill every month? It's because it went back to the normal price. You didn't even notice.
That's a lot of money.
Stuff like this. It's stupid.
Guys, I want to remind you guys, if you're watching live on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. Guys, we're doing the show each and every week, generally on Tuesdays or Thursdays, depending on the schedule. I tend to lean towards Thursdays, but if there's breaking news or anything, we do the show earlier in the week, obviously. But hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, subscribe to us. We're everywhere podcasts are available, audio and video form, on therot.com and, of course, on gfqnetwork.com. But if you're here on YouTube, hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 10,000 subscribers, which would be amazing to hit by the end of the year. So, I don't know. I think when it comes to content consumption, this is now, people are starting to see that the concept of cutting the cord doesn't necessarily mean it's cheaper. It just, the concept is it
used to be an incredible deal.
Oh my God.
By the way, I mean, YouTube has also had to add channels over time. I remember 3 years ago, right, when we first made this switch, HGTV wasn't available, and that was one of the things I was like, we watched those shows at the time. We really wanted that. That's available now, but they don't get that stuff for free. Like, they have to pay for it. So they have all these customers, and they're like, well, I want this one channel, and it's like, well, that one channel is part of a bundle we have to pay for, and that's the price goes up, up, and that's how it happens.
Anything I'm missing here with
this week in news?
Yeah.
I don't think so. I mean, the Apple thing was almost a week and a half ago, whatever. It's still, the driving thing today is just amazing.
Let me ask you this. What were the initial benchmarks on the hardware?
Yeah. I don't remember the actual scores, but they were basically roughly identical to what like Surface Pro X was getting. The problem is that Surface Pro X was running that benchmark natively because there is an ARM version of that, but on the Mac there isn't. And so that was running through the Rosetta 2 emulation. And that means that the native performance would be significantly higher.
Yeah. And especially considering this isn't even the chip it's going to ship with.
Yeah, that's the other thing.
So this is just that
it's also only running on half of the cores.
Oh, is it really? It's not running on all?
But it is the performance cores. I mean, let's not worry too much about that stuff. But I mean, one of the big advantages of the ARM platform is they have efficiency and performance cores. And so, depending on what you're doing, if you're streaming video or something, your performance cores are basically, mostly off at that point, because that's not really, honestly, it's just a bandwidth issue for the most part.
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll see. I mean, obviously, this is just the first step. I mean, there's going to be more. We're going to see actual hardware,
soon.
Yeah.
Right. When do you think they'll announce it? Probably in 2 months. This is shipping in the fall.
Yeah. One time to do it might be if they do that, a hardware event in the fall, like they usually do for iPhone, or they might just do it separately. Yeah. I would assume this holiday season is when we'll see.
I really hope. I really hope that the first device that had. Well, here's a question. I can't remember what the answer to this was, but did they say that it's going to be an entire product line? Like all the products are going to have this, or are they going to initially start off with one and then add them gradually?
No, they didn't. Okay, they didn't say specifically. The rumor is that there's going to be one desktop and one laptop. Look, I'll go out on a limb and say whatever this laptop is, the rumor is a Pro device, not an Air or whatever. But whatever that thing is, they're going to sell like 1 million of those right away. I mean, there is a huge audience of people that really wants to see what's going on there. The other thing, I actually, this probably came up last Monday. I think it was the same day, if I'm not mistaken. I had ordered a MacBook Air, remember, refurbished one, because it was like $800 or $900. And it arrived that night, and I was kind of reminded, Apple right now artificially limits the MacBook Air because they use like a kind of a lesser processor. It's not it's technically like a Y series processor. It is at least quad core this year. The 2018 model was a dual core version, but it's not as powerful as like the MacBook Pro. It's they just, to separate them, they do this kind of thing. And for whatever it's worth, I mean, day-to-day performance is fine, but if you do stuff like have a bunch of stuff going at once, or in my case, I'm using it mostly for software development, that fan kicks in, and it's
loud.
You can kind of see the problem. Like when Apple was talking about how like they ran into these problems with Intel, I was like, what are you talking about? Like, we have Intel chips in PCs, they work great. I don't see what the deal is, but the appeal of a Mac that has no fans and is completely silent, that it has anywhere near the performance of a Mac today, that would be kind of amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm very curious about that device. Lightweight. The other thing, I mean, I don't know if we spoke about this last week, but the thermal cooling in the Macs are terrible.
Yeah,
the way that
that's
they
what I've
design
heard.
it. So if you open the back of this, the fan it's just not good. The way the fan placement
it's like
is.
a leaf blower.
Yeah. So when these things heat up, you're really going to avoid that when you go to an ARM-based chipset, especially if that's yours. I'm curious if they're going to incorporate the same kind of heating technology that they're doing. Are they going to do a better thermal system inside of these? I'm curious to see.
I think they're going to be fanless. Well, I mean, at least the laptops. I just got, coincidentally today, a review unit from Lenovo of something called a Flex 5G, which is a Windows 10 on ARM device. It's running the latest Qualcomm PC chip, the 8CX, and it looks just like a normal convertible PC. It's nice, aluminum, nice keyboard, nice screen, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
In the photo, it looks, that's actually impressive. It looks plastic in the photo.
Oh, no, it doesn't. Oh, okay.
I was just looking at it.
I assume it's aluminum. It's definitely, it's okay. Well, it doesn't feel plastic, but there's not even a heat vent on this thing. It's at least not that you can see. Maybe they're venting through the keyboard or something, but it's certainly not got, it doesn't make a sound. Like there are compatibility problems for sure. I've already run into that. I mean, literally like an hour in, I'm like, oh yeah, right.
Is this the one that's running? Now I'm confused. Is this running an 8-core processor?
It is an 8-core processor.
Okay.
But it's ARM, right? So it's 4 energy efficiency cores and 4 performance. Yeah. Yep.
So it's running at actually, I just found it here, 2.8 gigahertz. And then it's the Qualcomm, what is it, 680 graphics chip. So everything's built in. How was it? How was the performance on this? Any good?
Well, just running around the UI, it's great. I haven't had time. All I've done so far is signed in with my account and try to find. I went to look for some apps. I had switched from Adobe Photoshop Elements to Affinity Photo. Adobe Photoshop Elements will not run on this device because it's a 64-bit app, and I was really hoping Affinity would.
Yeah.
But when I went to this, it's a 64-bit app, so I can't.
I was talking to someone about 5G right now. Have you tested it in your area yet, or no?
No, but this device has a 5G SIM in it, so
very curious to know.
Yeah,
very curious to know how it does with battery life.
Oh, interesting. Okay. Yeah, I'll have to. Well, I can just turn off the Wi-Fi. I was gonna say I'll go outside, and I kind of want to drive around the area to see if it gets better anywhere. Like I don't know what Verizon's 5G coverage looks like
in that area,
in the hinterlands where I live. But I mean, we're close to Allentown. Allentown's well, actually, it's a small city, but it's a city. I mean, they must have something. I'm curious. I mean, it's like because the dream of this is like. I could step out in the yard, turn the Wi-Fi off, and download a movie faster than I could with this thing connected to Ethernet. That would be amazing.
Yeah. Well, here's my question, right? Like, I'm curious how much better your speeds are going to be, because on 4G, here where I am, right? I'm in New York City, so obviously it's a very different market. I'm getting 100. I get 125 by 42 on average
on 4G.
On 4G,
by the way, that's amazing.
That's remarkable.
No, it's amazing.
So I don't have this, oh my God, I have to go to 5G to get the speeds.
Right, because you're already getting
remarkable speeds. Yeah, to get it on my phone. And also, some of it has to do with the technology in the phone on what it's capable of grabbing.
Yeah, that's true.
Right? The chip, you may have the option of getting a gigabit, but I got to tell you, a lot of people don't even know this.
Right.
Here's a shocker, guys. You sign up for gigabit service and you only have a laptop and you're using Wi-Fi, there's a good chance your laptop cannot do those speeds.
Right.
My Mac can't hit a gigabit on its Wi-Fi. It's impossible for it. I could be next to the device. It just won't do it.
It's funny. I've seen that. I just added a Wi-Fi point to our mesh networking thing. And, oh, good. One of them's offline. Let me guess. My daughter keeps unplugging this thing. I'm going to kill her. Anyway, I did it after I added it. I did a test in different rooms, and one of the things you can do is to test the speed to each of the devices that's connected to it, and the speed is very just across computers. There'll be like one computer that's like 286, and then the next one's like 54, and they're sitting next to each other, and it's just some compatibility between I don't something about the chipset in the device, or I don't know. I'm going to take this thing out of her room. I can't stand that she unplugs this thing. What
does she unplug?
The Wi-Fi point. Last time I said this, she goes, "I never touched this thing." I'm like, "Really? Maybe one of the cats is unplugging it because it's offline." And then I show it to her, and she goes, "Oh yeah, no, I unplugged that." I'm like, "I know you did. Stop doing that."
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm sorry.
Just unplug it. I'm just going to tell her to unplug. I'm going to message her. I'm going to tell her to keep unplugging it. Just do me a favor. Drive your dad nuts. Unplug everything. No, but I'm very curious how it's going to do.
You need the internet.
Nobody needs the internet, Paul. That's what I've learned. I'm over.
She's on it all day long, Andrew.
I want to go back. I want to go backwards. I want there. You know what? You know what I would love? 1 week without it. That's it. No internet for a week. I think it'll cause major. It'll cause a massive reset on all of us.
Well, you'll have some a bad couple of days, at first, but maybe you'll get used to it. When I was 18 years old, I got into a Volkswagen Super Beetle in New Mexico, and drove it all the way across the country with a friend of mine, and we had one paper map. It's what we had.
It's so funny.
I can't even imagine allowing a child to do something like that today. Like,
I was just talking about that with somebody, and I was in Jersey yesterday visiting a friend, and I've done the trip a bunch of times, so I could kind of, if I had to not use GPS, I could get there, right? I could remember I got to go over the George Washington Bridge, I got to take SR-17, I got to get off at this exit. I could remember this, but however, if you're telling me, "Hey Andrew, why don't you come by? I'm having a barbecue." Okay, right. How do I get to you? You're going to give me some convoluted fakakta instructions. Okay, there's going to be a Sunoco. You're going to turn left at the Sunoco. Then you're going to go down 3 lights, and at the church, you're going to make a right. That was the only way. I can't look at you had
there
to
was
know
there
how
was
to
an
get
SNL
around.
skit about this. The way people in New England give directions, take a left at the retarded kids selling fireworks. It's like this is the way people talked in the 90s, But I might have. There was a regional store in New England called Lechmere's, which was sort of like the prototype for Best Buy. Lechmere's was the Best Buy in the 1970s, and it was only in New England. And I used to go there all the time. I love this place. But Lechmere's in the early 90s went out of business, and then Lechmere's, a building, it sat there. The signs were all gone, and then eventually they tore down the building. But they used to use the parking lot for those fairs that traveled around, where the roller coaster wasn't tethered to anything. It would actually move up and down as
the Carney amusement
Carney
park,
thing. Yep. But the signs for this thing, it would be, whatever the carnival was called, it would always say it's in the Lechmere's parking lot. And if you didn't know what, you'd have to have lived there your whole life to have known that was Lechmere's. There wasn't one sign that said Lechmere's anywhere, but that's how we gave the directions.
That's how you did it.
Lechmere's parking lot.
But we are very lucky. Certain things, like I'll keep a GPS, I'll keep a cell phone. I don't want to be able to. I just want to do a week where I don't take my phone anywhere. I don't use it if I'm sitting at a bar. I feel like we're so distracted. We talk about this. You know what? Let's save it for What to Talk. We're gonna continue, guys. By the way, if you're watching live, stay tuned. We're doing What to Talk right after this, where we'll go into another subject for a little bit. But if you're listening to the podcast, you're listening here on YouTube, post recording, go sign up to Patreon. Patreon.com/what. Yes, sir.
Before we do that,
Yes,
I'm
yes,
going to
yes.
go downstairs and plug in that stupid Wi-Fi thing because
Go ahead. You do it.
I just want to. I'm going to plug it in and then hit my daughter in the head with it,
Do it. Go ahead.
so she won't forget. This is
Go
got
ahead.
to stay plugged in. It only works when it's
It only
plugged in.
works when it's plugged in.
That's the point of it.
Now imagine
It's not
if
a
it's not
planter.
unplugged.
It's internet.
Maybe she doesn't want it. Maybe she doesn't want internet anymore.
I don't. No, that's not it.
All right, you go and plug it in while I wrap it up here. While you come back, guys. Again, hit the subscribe button here on YouTube. Subscribe to us everywhere podcasts are available. We do the show each and every week. We're going to do What to Talk right after this. We're going to probably talk about the subject we were talking about, just surviving without technology. I want to get what the chat room thinks of this. I want to get the chat room's opinion of this because this is something that I constantly toy with, especially now with the way that the internet is and just constant stimulation over and over again. Might be better for us. Let's see. We'll talk about it. Go to our website, gfknetwork.com. Subscribe everywhere podcasts are available, and we'll see you all next week. Take care.